About Herbie.
Okay, so he came in and said, I want you to go home and write something about an everyday, ordinary occurrence. In other words, if you see someone crossing the road, write a piece of music that represents that. He said it doesn't need to be something dramatic. Just put together a piece of music that takes the elements of something that you've observed and make something out of that. So, I mean, if somebody does that and gets away from replicating things they've heard, I mean, if you write a piece and you say this is based on John Coltrane, who was John Coltrane writing based on? He wasn't doing that, you know what I mean? So you have to start drawing on things that are your personal experiences, and if you do that, I think naturally it'll have a unique sound.
Can you give an example of what somebody came up with that was unique? Because you know what I think it's...
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe in words. It's something you'd obviously have to hear, but...
Let me pivot out for a minute. I like the fact that you're digging deeper. I mean, when I talk to a lot of cats, Stuart Levine, producers, they say people start at kind of blue, but actually you need to go much farther than that.
That's true.
So, I mean, are you playing the type of music from that time with their own individual twist, or is it just straight like Dixieland into swing into...
Are you talking about what they're doing?
Yeah.
You mean when they do the history thing, or when
exactly
they do
the history thing? Yeah, the history thing.
Oh no, when they do the history thing, we're trying to do it as authentically as possible.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I introduce it by saying that these guys are going to function as the time machine and take you back to that time. Because for this type of a presentation, you can't. I mean, unless you decided to spend a bunch of money and fly around the country and go to hear all these different bands, how are you going to hear an early jazz group and a big band and so on and so forth? So what we're trying to do with this presentation is in 1 hour give everyone the experience of kind of traveling into that time period and hearing it as authentically as we can present it. But when they're doing their own music, yeah, it's they're, they do the things that their generation does. They like odd time signatures. They like songs that have sort of longer, the heads are longer, and then the soloing isn't just on the form of the head. There are things there are things they do that are specific to their age group. You know what I mean? But the challenge that they have along with everybody else is you still have to be able to make music that if a guy's walking down the street and he hears something coming out of a club, he should want to go in and hear that. He shouldn't have to have a master's degree in music to understand it. So how do you take all this wealth of information that you have and all this sophistication and then boil it down to something that can compel the common man? They have to do that without dumbing it down.
Well, because jazz was for the common man for so long. It was, people would go in, Art Blakey said, my job is to wash away the dust of everyday life.
That's right.
You know this. I know you know this.
So they still need to, they can get as, sophisticated as they want, but it still needs to have that.
Right. Well, it has to have feel.
Right.
Do you talk about the Kluk and Pete LaRocca and those cats, the kind of different rhythms? Because to me, that's my pocket.
Yeah.
My pocket is, I'm producing a documentary on Stan Getz.
Okay.
So Getz was a monster bebop player, right? So you had Stan Levy and all those cats, and the rhythms, and then you go into the '60s. And it's more R&B influence, like Bernard Purcell. How deep do you get into that? Because that, to me, the Horace Silver, that blues stuff, I wish you could just sit in that pocket for the first hour.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
Well, as you said, these guys are autodidacts, so they've all done a lot of homework on their own instrument and on the history. I mean, you can ask, they'll do a very good representation of any person. Ask the piano player to play like Bud Powell or Monk. He can, they've spent hours and hours studying that. But the people that come in to teach them work on that type of stuff. Like we just did 3 hours with Lewis Nash on Thursday night, and he wasn't talking about players specifically, but he was getting down to the fine details of how to play drums and how to get certain sounds across and certain feels across. So it gets everything gets put under a microscope by the different people that come in, and everybody teaches differently. So when Jimmy Heath is teaching, he'll teach one way. When Wayne teaches, he teaches a very different way. Wayne is much more sort of philosophical and kind of elliptical and
because Stanley Clarke told me that Wayne Shorter said, playing spiritual music is like going to the store to get your grandmother some milk. Okay, it's that love, right? Okay, but see, I'm operating on that plane as a journalist, okay, because I'm not a musician.
Right.
I'm curious about, really for you though, what is your role? I mean, you can't. You can't get any higher than Herbie and Wayne. Okay?
Right.
Like those guys are the head of the Monk Institute, but Daniel Seeff. Daniel Seeff. What is your hope? What are you trying to? Why are you in the position that you're in?
Well, I mean, I could go on and on about that.
Yeah, go do it.
Yeah, okay. Well, so I mean, the first thing is to gather together musicians of this level and put them in a situation where they have the opportunity to learn from the people that came before them. So any one of these guys, when we go to these schools, one of the questions is how often or how long do you practice? And I like to ask them to answer that question by saying, how long do they practice at the height of their practicing? Because some of them went through a year of being crazy practicers, and now it's kind of settled down. We have them on a pretty intense schedule, so they don't have as much time to practice. But at their height, it was 6 to 8 hours for some of these guys, and that's what it takes, 6 to 8 hours a day. So some of these guys put in 6 to 8 hours a day for 2 to 3 years of practicing technical stuff, practicing improvisation, listening to music, and they eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Then what happens after that? If they don't have contact with the kind of people that we bring in, they're sort of making their own path. So
what's your role in that? So I mean, you are a. I want to know your specific.
My role is I'm just an organizer essentially.
I love it. I mean, what a gig.
Yeah, I'm the organizer, but obviously I have my own idea of what my purpose is in being an organizer. So that would be one of my purposes, is that we have this large application process where we get about 150 applications. From that, they get narrowed down to 30 that fly to LA, and the 30 play live for Herbie, Wayne, Kenny Burrell, Jimmy Heath, James Newton, Herb Alpert. And those guys make the decision about who gets picked. But so that part of it is kind of, I'd almost say, rewarding the people that have done this amount of work by allowing them to be able to interact with these great artists that are the creators of this music. Then from there, the next goal would be that they go out and have an impact, that they keep it alive, keep it fresh, develop it into new directions. I don't feel that it needs to be so completely devoted to being one way of playing jazz, because we've had guys that have gone out and played things that are jazz related but wouldn't be considered purely jazz. We've had guys that have gone on to be educators. We've had guys that have gone on to be innovators in technology. And they're still doing, to me, it's still the same thing. It's still sort of promoting elements of this music, or bringing the good elements of this music into people's lives. So that would be the goal. But then the other goal when we take them into high schools is to spread awareness about this music, because it's tied into history, it's tied into American history, African American history, and it's also got, and I'll talk about this at the presentation, but it represents ideals. Herbie and Wayne talk about the fact that it's one of the only styles of music that allows you to display leadership on a minute-to-minute basis. In other words, you're working with other guys and you suddenly have an idea and you think, I'm going to take the lead, and you've got an opportunity to do that, but you've got to pick your moment right, and then they have to kind of fall in to support you.
Yeah, isn't that really the point of that? Someone asked Dizzy, what is jazz? And he said jazz is truth on the bandstand, in the sense that you can improvise or take a leadership position, and everyone is going to accept that and allow you to be yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
How hard is it for younger cats to be themselves today? I mean, we live in a more formulaic society.
I think that's true. I mean, there's room for people to do it. I mean, I think one of the challenges is that there's 100 plus years of music to learn. And how are you going to spend all your time learning that, at the end of it have something that's specific to you? That's a lot to ask for. Every decade that goes by, there's another 10 years worth of stuff to learn. So at a certain point, I think, and I can think of people like Ambrose Akinmusiri, the trumpet player that graduated from the Institute. He had a very thorough knowledge of history, but I think at a certain point he decided it's time for me to work on my individuality. You know what I mean? You could spend the rest of your life just studying history, but at a certain point you have to decide it's time for you to, and Billy Childs is another person who I've heard talk about that at a certain point you have to decide who you are and kind of go for that. You know what I mean? And I think it can be overwhelming to have decade after decade of music that you're supposed to learn and absorb and so on and so forth. So they do it, but at a certain point you have to decide you're going to devote time to yourself.
Daniel Seeff, what piece of music, can I make a request for the early 70s?
For them to play?
Like when you get into this time period, I mean, this early 70s period is a hypnotic time.
Right.
It's pre-drum, pre-click track, pre-disco.
Right.
And it was the blending of all musics at that time.
Right. Yeah.
I'm curious what tunes you play.
Well, for this, the presentation, it's actually interesting. We've had a conversation about whether.
I hope you don't gloss over the early 70s. I mean,
No. They play The Chicken. Pee Wee Ellis, James Brown, that Jocko made famous.
Okay, so that is definitely more soul.
Right, exactly.
And then, so what about the late 60s post-bop?
So give me an example of what you're thinking of.
Go back to Horace Silver, back to Blue Mitchell, like hard bop, but post-bop.
I see.
Like late 60s.
Well, they do Moanin', which I guess is earlier than that.
And Blakey, that was more.
Yeah, Blakey, yeah.
What about bebop? Like,
Yeah,
do
they
they
do,
do
yeah.
dizzy? Do they do anything?
Yeah, well, they do one bebop piece. So, I mean, in an hour you can't. What you're talking about, it would take more like 3 hours to probably get that detailed. But yeah, so they do either Donnelly or Confirmation, which are Charlie Parker. Donnelly, some people say Miles Davis wrote. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but
Right.
they do that as an example. I mean, what we have to do for something like this is really almost exaggerate and drive home the qualities of that style. So if you're going to do bebop, you should do it really fast. You should pick a super bebop melody that's fast, because the point of it in this presentation is to show how it differed from swing. So they play A Train, da 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 da, followed by so that the audience can clearly hear you've gone from this lyrical singable melody that also did have words to Confirmation, which is not that's not, I wouldn't consider it lyrical. That's a great melody, but that's a very fast and complicated. It's like taking a roller coaster ride listening to those bebop melodies.
The other thing is you have vibes, which is exhilarating to me.
Yeah.
Do you get into like Cal Jader stuff?
I mean, we haven't yet, but that could be something that they could explore.
I mean, to me, it's like that. Some of that Latin jazz that was going on.
Yeah.
Was such a language. Herbie was part of that with Willie Bobo and those cats.
Exactly.
Yeah. The instrumentation though, it's alto, tenor, bone.
Yeah.
How do you come up with that? Is it just the people that make the cut, or
It's
is
the people that make the cut.
Okay.
Yeah. So in other words, the instrumentation changes every class, because it's not that like there are slots to fill. I can't imagine we'd ever have a band that didn't have piano, bass, drums, and sax. Probably that I would say that's kind of the foundation. But then around that, we've had singers, we've had guitar players. We have, for whatever reason, had a lot of vibes players. There've just been a lot of good vibes players that have applied. I'm trying to think of. So we've had, in terms of people that have applied and made it to the final round of auditions, we've had harmonica players, violin players, clarinet player. I'm trying to think of what else. So it's open as to what could happen, but the panel obviously has to like who's there. They're not gonna, for instance, this band doesn't have a trumpet player, and the last band didn't have a trumpet player, but the previous band did. So it's more based on who makes it to that final round in terms of the instrumentation.
Well, listen, I'll let you get on, but I would like to propose something to you down the road, is to bring in all the studio cats from that LA scene who idolized the jazzers. Keltner, they're all out there. I'm connected. To me, it's all music.
Right.
It's either good or bad.
Yeah.
And stratification has really hurt the vocabulary of music. So I want to be able to bring those cats into to work with the cats that learn from the master, Herbie and Wayne.
Right.
I mean, all I'm saying is this is like a bridge to building new vocabulary.
Right.
Which is essential.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. My pleasure.
Cheers, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks.